today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about why is it that sometimes it seems like men always have to handle the tough stuff. True partnerships. Men need to learn to be softer. Women need to learn to be tougher. You can't have that kind of relationship if there isn't some softness. Also, celebrate the small wins. Celebrate growth. Celebrate baby steps forward. Progress, not perfection, is always the way forward when we're learning something new. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about weaponized softness. Or why is it that women and men feel like guys should handle the tough stuff? A listener asks, whenever I asked her to handle the bills or make a tough decision, she gets upset. And she says she can't deal with the stress. Am I supposed to just do it all? This is the definition of weaponized softness. It's about using vulnerability or emotional withdrawal or overwhelm to avoid difficult responsibilities. Now, I want to be really clear. Men do this too. Some of the complaints we're getting today in 2025 about men is they're too soft. So weaponized softness isn't just something that women do. It's something that men and women do. But historically, because of the relationships set up by men in their male-dominated society, weaponized softness became a way to manipulate men and to get them motivated and to do things. Now, I want to be really clear. Softness is not bad. Lots of men feel like they can't be soft. The complaint many women have about men today is they won't or can't be soft. Softness is required if there's going to be vulnerability. And if you don't have vulnerability in your relationship, you don't have safety. And if you don't have safety, you don't have trust. And if you don't have trust, you don't have intimacy. Vulnerability is a vital part to an intimate, caring, loving partnership. And in case you haven't heard this before, here on Rich in Relationship, the definition of a partnership is a marriage in which two people build a relationship together, a relationship that sustains them as individuals. So not only do they build the relationship, but the relationship sustains them through the tough times. You can't have that kind of relationship if there isn't some softness. Let's explore this some more. In the last episode, we talked about weaponized incompetence. This is when somebody pretends they just don't know how to do something or they're unwilling to do something. Emptying the dishwasher, changing diapers, taking care of the children, putting gas in the car. Weaponized softness is the flip side of weaponized incompetence. In fact, weaponized incompetence is, I just don't have the ability to do it. Weaponized softness is, I don't have the emotional strength to do it. And you see what I'm talking about? It's either about ability or emotional strength. These are both ways to avoid things maybe we don't want to do. They're both ways to manipulate the other person. They're both ways to control or dominate the situation. They're both ways to escape into ourselves. A woman writes to us, I grew up hearing that men should handle the tough stuff. Am I just falling into old patterns? Yes, this is an old pattern. It's an old cultural script. The old cultural script is that women socialize and focus on nurturing, not on leadership, not on confrontation, not on achieving goals, not on moving forward. That's for guys to do. If we're going to have true partnerships, men need to learn to be softer. Women need to learn to be tougher. A lot of my clients are what you call alpha females. They're super tough. Actually, for a lot of them, it's about learning to be soft. Because in their work environment, if they aren't tough, they get run over. And when they come home, they have trouble being soft because they're so conditioned in their work environment to deal with a certain kind of man in a certain kind of way. In previous, actually even current gender role conditioning, the way a lot of us were raised, maybe up to the most recent generation, men are viewed as providers and decision makers, and women as peacekeepers. And the truth is that there are some men who are awesome peacekeepers. I'm a peacekeeper, a bridge builder myself. And there's some women who are awesome providers. Now, truthfully, we've talked a lot about brain development here at Rich Relationship. We've talked about how brains that develop in a genetically female body and brains that develop in a genetically male body tend to be, on the genetically male side, more linear, and on the genetically female side, more emotionally attuned. So it might be that women, in some ways, are better suited to emotional attunement, but that doesn't mean they can't be tough. And it might be that men are better wired for following a path and being tough about following that path, but it doesn't mean they can't stop and be emotionally aware. It may take more effort on both sides, and it will. But what that effort will deliver, because there is such a thing as neuroplasticity, is the brain will become more complex and more evolved. And the more complex and more evolved the brain is, the better it functions and the better it cares for the organism. So we want this. In 2021, Pew Research did a study. Even in dual earner households, men are twice as likely to be the financial decision makers, especially when it comes to investments and risk. Does it have to be this way? No. I've got some female clients who are amazing risk takers. They make their decisions about taking risks very differently than men. Well, a better way to put it would be they look deeper and further, but they take risks. I want her input on our future, but she says it makes her anxious. Am I asking too much? Says John. He's 42 from Cincinnati. The emotional cost of this weaponized softness is that men feel isolated in leadership roles. It's true, some men embrace it as a form of control, and we're going to talk about that more in the next episode. But really, underneath the control is insecurity, right? If we desire to control others, it's because we're deeply insecure within ourselves. When we're confident in ourselves, we don't need to control what's on the outside. It is actually disempowering for men to always take on the tough things. It disempowers them with their children. It disempowers them in their partnership, just as it's disempowering for women to not take on the tough jobs. It disempowers them with their men. It disempowers them in their day-to-day careers. The practical cost is that decisions skew toward one worldview, leading to an imbalance in the long-term vision of the family. Couples where only one partner makes financial logistical decisions report lower overall satisfaction and higher stress, says the Journal of Family Issues in 2020. How do I know I'm honoring my limit or just avoiding responsibility? Asked Jackie in New York. This is a great question. How do you know you're honoring your limit or just avoiding responsibility? There's this great book by David Goggins. I can't remember what it's called. He's a former Navy SEAL. And David Goggins' whole mission for the first half of his life was to prove that his body could do so much more than his mind thought it could. He's like the ultimate leader in toughness. And so what makes this question so great is our conscious mind often believes in the limits that the unconscious mind is complaining that we have. But Goggins proves in his book that we can often press ourselves way beyond what we think we can do physically. Well, this is true in every aspect of our life. The truth is that our minds are conditioned to believe in the limitations that we have, but often our actual limitation is far, far beyond that. And so even when we're honoring our limits, there's a form of avoidance going on for men and women in all aspects. But here are some signs of weaponized softness. If you're avoiding tough conversations by crying, stonewalling is when you just don't respond, or claiming incapacity, I'm just not up to it, I'm too stressed out right now, the chances are there's some form of weaponized softness going on. If you're delegating decision making with, you just better at this, the chances are you're avoiding rather than honoring your limits. If you're consistently stepping out when conflict or complexity arises, you are avoiding. So many of the couples who come to work with me have been avoiding conflict. Both of them have been avoiding conflict one way or another for so long that they're stewing. And then periodically they explode because you can't avoid conflict endlessly. Eventually the differences become so great. The built up emotion becomes so great that some form of release has to happen. Or instead of exploding, they lead completely separate lives. And then their children grow up and they get divorced because they don't feel like they have a grounds for a marriage anymore. Studies on household labor show that when women claim overwhelm to opt out, men's domestic contributions rise, but so does relationship dissatisfaction. And that's the American Sociological Review in 2018. Domestic contributions, that's not necessarily housework, by the way. That's everything regarding the home. That's the tough decisions. That's the tough choices. So the evidence is, from all the studies we've cited, that this is a common pattern. It's a pattern that's been passed on from generation to generation. It's one that we're in the process of overcoming as we embrace the equality of men and women in their differences. And the point of this episode and the last episode is we can't use those differences as an excuse not to step up. We can't use those differences as an excuse not to cross boundaries, not to stress. We need to continue stretching. We need to continue growing. We need to, as human beings, we need to test the boundaries. We need to stretch our limits. I'm afraid I'll mess it up if I take over. How do I build confidence? Says Juanita from the Bronx. Wow, that's a tough question. Building confidence takes time. It takes effort. It takes building new habits. It takes, and I'm curious whether we're talking about confidence or whether we're talking about self-esteem. If we're talking about self-esteem, that's a little different than confidence. But confidence is when we know that we can do something well. So as we described in the previous episode, the steps for learning to do something well are, number one, knowing what the best way is to do it, consciously attacking that task through the best way known to do it, and then getting to the point where you become unconsciously competent at it. That's how you can have confidence. Once you become unconsciously competent, you can be confident. It's like how many of us drive without thinking about it. We're unconsciously competent. We're confident. Not everybody, but many of us. Start with shared leadership, then move into solo responsibility. So if you're moving into an area of toughness that seems tough to you, whatever it may be, if it's child rearing, if it's finances, move into it together. Watch how your partner does it. Read about it. Learn about it. We all have our own learning styles. Some people learn by reading. Some people learn by doing. Some people learn by watching. It's good to do all three because we learn something in all those three processes. But we all have one central way that we learn. So start by working with your partner if they have strength in this area or someone else who has strength in this area. And then use planning tools. Figure out what parts are you going to do. As we said in the last episode, it's really important for one person to be in charge of each silo or area, but it's also really important for each person, for both people to work in all areas. Both people should be involved in child rearing. Both people should be involved in finances. Both people should be involved in cooking, etc. It's important to cross-train, to use a business metaphor. Also, celebrate the small wins. Celebrate growth. Celebrate baby steps forward. Progress, not perfection, is always the way forward when we're learning something new. Women who actively participate in financial, logistical decision-making report higher relationship satisfaction and a greater sense of equality, says a study in 2022. Now, it is fully possible when we're learning these new skills that we may become victims of mansplaining, or maybe emotional oversharing. And that's what we're going to cover in the next episode of Rich in Relationship. Hey, if you like what you're hearing, like us, subscribe, share this podcast with other people. Help us to fulfill our mission of 10,000 families touched in 10 years. I'm Rich Heller, wishing you an amazing today and a fantastic tomorrow.